Welcome to the At The Helm podcast, where we steer through everything from sports to superheroes. I am your host, Blake Helms. Today, with arguably the most exciting part of the year for sports in America right around the corner in March Madness, today I'm going to discuss, as a student at a Big 12 school in Iowa State, clearly, since a lot of the March basketball is actually the conference tournaments, I'm going to talk about the top Big 12 teams going into the conference and NCAA tournaments because, yeah, if you don't think that the Big 12 is the best basketball conference and has several contenders to go all the way at the end of April is going to be actually when that tournament ends, you're crazy. But I'm not saying it's a guarantee that a Big 12 team is going to win. There's some really good ones out there like Duke and Michigan, but I think the top is stacked with Big 12 teams that I think it's safe for me to say that we have a good likelihood a national champion from this conference. So I'm going to go in detail of who I think are the top 6 teams in the Big 12, and I think we'll go pretty far. 5 out of the 6 I think will be in just Sweet 16 would be the minimum of acceptance for their fans. And then, just teams that I think are going to have had good seasons and I think could at least make a bit of a splash in March, whether it's the Big 12 conference tournament, getting far in that, possibly winning, or, getting into the later rounds of the NCAA tournament bracket. So I'm going to start off with the Iowa State Cyclones, who I'm recording this on Saturday, March 7th. So I actually did just get back from watching them beat Arizona State. That was really fun in the last home game of the season. Got to see the seniors have their last game. But yeah, right now they're ranked number 6. I think they'll probably go down a little bit because since the last ranking we had that lost to Arizona at Arizona. So, that's going to affect things. But yeah, with that win, that moved their record to 25-6 on the year, 12-6 in conference. So yeah, that's outside of conference. Iowa State's done extremely well this year. Obviously, I just said that all their losses are against conference teams, and some of them are like, a lot of these other teams that I'm going to talk about. So, but that means, when they've played teams from other conferences, they've done really well. I'm not saying they've played all the greats from the ACC and Big Ten, but they beat Iowa, they beat Purdue, they beat St. John's, which were really good wins. And I mean, hey, they've had a really good season this year. I mean, they're at a better state going into March than it's March now, but you know what I mean, going into the tournaments than they were last year. Last year we were injured, especially with Keyshawn Gilbert, and I think Tamin Lipsey was also having injuries late in the year. But we're healthy now. We're healthy this time around, and we could definitely make a splash. Because they can beat I think anyone. It's just whether they will. And the biggest things about Iowa State's the men's basketball team this year is, for at least their 2 biggest issues, is that one, they've really struggled at the free throw line this year, especially, Jefferson's had a rough year of it. Lipsey's down from previous years. Momcilovic has done fine. He's just a great shooter. Great shooters from beyond the arc usually do really good at free throws. So, he's done well as expected. But, the other thing is Iowa State struggled away. Granted, most of the rest of the games now are at neutral sites. There's always going to be crowds that favor one team depending on where it is, if it's closer to that campus, or just how well those fans travel. Like, I've heard Kansas City, the site of the Big 12 tournament, referred to as Hilton South. So hopefully that comes into play and helps us, because the Iowa State team does really well in the Hilton Coliseum environment, only losing 1 game in Hilton all season, and to a really good team in Texas Tech. College basketball is maybe the area where home court / home field advantage is probably the most felt. Not saying that like college football, pro basketball, baseball, any of those sports where it's not, but as someone who's like been in one of the best college basketball environments frequently these last 2 years, it really is different. I mean, when I was at it's really good pretty much every game, especially when there's a good game. You know, I've went to both Kansas games that were here last 2 years. Those are really good environments, but that Houston game was different this year because, you know, it was close throughout. It was that's a really good team. And, you know, there's been maybe a slight rivalry the last couple of years, especially since we beat them in the Big 12 championship a couple of years ago. So, you know, maybe there's, you know, that's two really good teams in the same conference. You know, they might butt heads a little bit. But, I mean, yeah, that was just an insane environment. I mean, when Heisey hit that 3 to go ahead late, and probably the definition of catch and shoot, like, I don't even know if he had time to really grab that ball before he just shot it, and it went in perfectly. But, I mean, yeah, that's the name of the game in college basketball. Environments do a lot. I mean, Duke and North Carolina are constantly splitting because both of them have really good environments, and being at home makes a big difference. I mean, the same thing with Kansas and Iowa State these last few years. Hilton and Allen Fieldhouse are great in home environments, and it makes a big difference because football has great crowd environments, and there's more people there since it's a bigger thing. But since most football, at least college football stadiums, are, you know, outdoors, you know, the sound, you know, it has places to go. It's not like trapped in and doesn't have the echo that a basketball stadium has. So it feels louder and you feel the impact more inside basketball stadiums. And Iowa State's kind of relied on that this year with their big games. You know, all their big wins this year, aside from Purdue, have been at home or a neutral site. So I'm hoping this neutral site does better than one that is dedicated to the other team. But, you know, I've only been an avid Iowa State follower these last 2 years, and we haven't done great in these tournaments. But I usually am just kind of saying, you know, we run into some pretty good teams eventually, and we were hurt last year. It's going to be interesting for me to see them kind of healthy for the first time in one of these situations where I'm avidly focusing on them, because obviously I watched their Sweet 16 game a couple years ago against Illinois, but, you know, I'm from Illinois, so I was rooting for Illinois at that point because I wasn't officially going to Iowa State yet. I did watch that game thinking I probably would be rooting for Iowa State if they ever played again, but, you know, and that was a great game. I mean, Iowa State's defense under T.J. Otzelberger, and probably longer than he's been around, probably his predecessors, and maybe even going back all the way to Johnny Orr in his legendary time as coaching Iowa State, bringing them back into the limelight after a while where I don't see years with accomplishments on the banners inside Hilton until Johnny Orr's tenure. But, you know, they're a very defensively focused team, you know, effort, hustle. It's tremendous to watch. It's really fun to actually see. It's just really cool to witness, just especially like a Tamin Lipsey, who is legitimately from Ames, Iowa, and has probably just been dreaming about being an Iowa State guy forever since he was a kid. And, you know, playing, and, you know, he just loves and puts his all into every single game. That, you know, that's why he's my personal favorite player on the team. Like, I love it. I mean, it's kind of how I wish I was able to play back then. Like, you know, obviously, I tried to have a similar mentality when I played basketball. I'm not sure if it actually happened or maybe that was just me thinking, but obviously he does it a lot better. But, you know, I mean, he's great. Milan is the best, probably the best shooter in the country. And Jefferson's great at kind of pretty much all three levels. He's just he either has the single season or the career record, or maybe both, for triple doubles at Iowa State. But yeah, going through their season and just how they've done this year, I've touched on some of these wins and losses already, but they beat number 14 St. John's at a neutral site, 83-82. So they beat them by really close 1 point. They beat Purdue at Purdue in what I believe was tied for the biggest deficit, number one team in a loss at home ever. And then, this isn't a win against an amazing team, but hey, beat Iowa. That's always fun. Reminding them it's a Cyclones. You can't beat us in anything anymore. But yeah, 66-62 at home. That required a comeback. Rivalry games are always tough, no matter what on paper the difference is. Winning a rivalry game is always big, and it usually has a lot of challenges with it. But yeah, beat Kansas when they were ranked number 9 at home, 74-56. When they were fresh off ending Arizona's undefeated season at that time. So that was really fun, and that was Darren Peterson's return. And then, like I alluded to earlier, beat number 2 at the time, Houston, 70-67 at home in a tremendous game. And I don't watch every basketball game. I keep my finger on the pulse, especially with the rankings, since my team is always in those rankings, and I want to see how things have changed. But obviously, Houston's great, and I think that was probably the best game of the year, at least easily the best game that I've seen. And there's been some solid ones that I've seen, like Michigan Duke was a fun game to watch. But yeah, that was just an incredible, very electric. Being there in person was so fun. But yeah, that great win. At this point, unfortunately, with how they've been playing since then, at this point, that's probably the peak of the season. Beating Kansas, 2 days later, beating Houston both at home. Hopefully, I'm eating my words in a few weeks, and we're hoisting up a trophy. Whether it be, hopefully, a Big 12 trophy would be really nice. Add, Big 12's tough conference this year. It's gonna be hard to do. And then our losses. Our first loss of the season was early January when we had to go to Allen Fieldhouse and an unranked at the time Kansas. This is kind of when they really started getting back into it because they had a rough start to the season. Then they were unranked, and then they beat us, and then it kind of brought their climb back up, which, now they're at solid distance right now. Probably going to get a 3, maybe 4 at lowest seed in the tournament for Kansas, but yeah, they beat us bad. And then unfortunately, right after the Houston game, I believe our very next game, we lost at BYU, who was ranked number 23 at the time, 79-69. That was a good environment at least it felt that way when I was watching on TV. That looked like a great environment. First home loss against number 16 at the time, Texas Tech, 82-73. Wasn't here for that one. I was at the Elimination Chamber in Chicago, but then it didn't look like we couldn't shoot and they could. That's always that always hurts when the other team just has a really good shooting night. And then the next game, Monday, we lost to number 2 Arizona, 73-57. And the score doesn't show. That was a close game for up until like maybe 6 minutes when they started getting away from us. But that happens in sports. Low scoring early on. Arizona figured out a way to do it. Iowa State never really did. So that was the result there. Highest rank of the season was number 2, which I believe was going into the Kansas game when we were undefeated at the time. Then, that obviously point ranked. Stats-wise this year, Iowa State has scored 81.6 points per game, which is sixth ranking in the Big 12. They're shooting 49% from the field, second in the Big 12. Also second in the Big 12, 38.4% three-point percentage. Probably carried a little bit by Milan Momcilovic. Points allowed, this 65.8, third in the conference. Like I said, defense is where Iowa State shines. Point differential, we're at plus 15.8 per game, second in the conference. So Iowa State ranks really well stats-wise throughout the season in the conference. They've had a little bit of a skid. They struggled scoring. Today they did well. They had I think today against Arizona State, they had a point where they had scored 24 unanswered points from being down 4 early in the second half to being up 20, which was really fun. Carried by a lot of defense. So many steals. It was crazy. Yeah, that it was a fun game. And then star players, I'm going to shout out the star players of each of these teams. Milan Momcilovic, 17 points per game, 3.1 rebounds per game, point 9 assists per game, 51.8 from the field, 50.2% from beyond the arc, which is just insane. I mean, that's just an unbelievable shooting. I mean, a lot of the reason Iowa State struggles shooting, teams just don't leave Milan Momcilovic anymore. They don't give him any space. Like early in the game against Arizona State today, the only times Milan was getting open shots was in transition. Like it's hard. They've been making it hard for him to get open lately. You got Justin Jefferson, 16.6 points per game, 7.4 rebounds per game, 5.1 assists, 45.8 from the field, 34.8 from three. You know, he's a power forward kind of guy. You know, he can shoot. He had made a few today. But you know, it's not a specialty. His specialty is more in the mid-range, shorter shots area. But you know, he's your guy that can get everything done. He can get assists. He'll get plenty of boards. And yeah, he's often the leading scorer. It's not usually either him or Milan, but yeah, I'd say Jefferson probably in pure numbers is the leading scorer. When Milan does lead, he usually just has more points. That's why he's usually second. Then my personal favorite, Tamin Lipsey, 13.2 points per game, 4.2 rebounds per game, 5.0 assists per game. I added 2.1 steals per game, and that may have went up because I got these stats before a couple days ago. So, yeah, and he had a few steals today. That's awesome. 46% from the field, an unfortunate 27.7 from three, which, you know, his three-pointers aren't really his area of where he focuses on a lot, but he can do it. He'll hit some deep ones, and during this kind of stretch where they struggled scoring a little bit, Tamin had kind of been the one that had been able to get stuff done. So yeah, Iowa State, as an Iowa State homer, anything other than Sweet 16 is just extremely disappointing, and I think we should get I think we should get Elite Eight, in my opinion. But you know, it's called March Madness for a reason. Upsets happen. Teams that should never win multiple games in this setting can get all the way to the Elite Eight and Final Four even. But I think we should be we're a really good team this year. I'd be disappointed to meet anything else, but you know, sometimes it's hard to grade yourselves against the competition of other Power Four teams. You know, other conferences have great teams, and sometimes you really don't know where you stack up against them specifically. You just kind of are able to compare yourself to your own conference, which the Big 12 this year, there's been so much beating each other that it's even hard to say in this conference. Arizona's probably the top dog, but other than that, it's really a free-for-all. And Arizona has losses against other top teams, so, you know, it's tough to tell. But yeah, I'm going to use that to lead into talking about the Arizona, who currently ranked number 2. I haven't looked at their, but when I last looked, they were 28-2 with a conference record of 15-2. Major wins on the season, and you know, with their season, there are a lot of them. But they beat number 1 ranked Florida at a neutral site early in the season, 93-87. They beat number 3 at the time, UConn, 71-67 at UConn, which is very impressive. Beat number 20 Auburn, 97-68 at in Arizona. They swept BYU in their series, beating them when they were ranked 13 at BYU and when they were ranked 23 at Arizona. They were able to get back on Kansas when they returned to Arizona, beat them 84-61, so they beat them pretty good too. They beat Iowa State at home 73-57. That was just this past Monday, and then they did get that win over Houston. I think that was right after their 2 losses, so that was a big win, beating them 73-66 in Houston. So that was probably their biggest win of the season. Just like, you know, because other than maybe that number 1 Florida win, you know, being the number 1 team is always a big deal. But yeah, I mean, being able to beat Houston, who's a really good team, when you know you're fresh off a couple big losses right after, not having to really deal with that kind of stuff at all during the season. That's really big for them. That's really big for the Wildcats. And yeah, like I was saying, Arizona is the team to beat. They're insanely good. They dominated. They were number one almost all season. They've been number one ever since the early season field just kind of cleared. Then they were number one for like 2 months straight or so. But yeah, going into those losses, they lost to number 9 ranked Kansas, 82-78 in Allen Fieldhouse. So at Kansas, that's a tough place to go into and win. And, that's what finally caught them. Funny thing is, Peterson wasn't even playing that game because, he's missed a lot of time this year. But, yeah, some people say Kansas plays better when he's not on the court. But, that's probably not true. But, they did have their probably biggest win of the season when he wasn't on the court. But, what do I know? Yeah, then right afterwards, later that week, they lost to Texas Tech at home still in Arizona, 78-75 in overtime. I mean, it's a really good game. That's a great game to watch. I watched the end of that game. That was a really fun one. Overtime. I mean, that's the thing. You have 2 losses this year. One of them's in a really tough environment to go win at. The other's in overtime. So, Arizona has had an amazing season. Like I said, they are ranked number 1 for the longest time. They're highest ranked. And I'll just lead off these stats real quick. 86.6 points per game leads the Big 12. 50.1% from the field leads the Big 12. Not the best 3-point team. 35.36 in the Big 12. So not bad, but still. Points allowed, 68.2 per game. So fifth in the Big 12. So they're better offensively than defensively, but that's top 5 in both. It's still really good. Point differential, 18.3 points per game, first in the Big 12. I mean, Arizona's just a really good team this year, man. I mean, it's madness. Things go wrong late in the year, and usually the best teams during the season don't actually win the NCAA tournament, but maybe that's not happening as much anymore because the last 2 years, you could definitely say the best team throughout the year did win both tournaments. UConn dominated all season 2 years ago. They just brushed that tournament to the side, destroyed everybody. And then last year, Florida, coming off their SEC conference win, ended up winning it all like I predicted. So that I'm very proud. I predicted that correctly. And I'm not saying Arizona is the absolute number 1 team in the country throughout the year, but at this time, Duke is currently ranked number 1 going into their game that's happening right now against North Carolina at Duke to end their regular season. But Arizona's number 2. They're obviously a team that's going to be winning a lot of people's brackets in a couple weeks, so they're going to be a tough team to beat. Let's look at their star players real quick. Braden Burries, 15.5 points per game, 4.9 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 49.4% from the field. That's very good. 36.9 from 3. Then you got Jaden Bradley, 13.1 points, 3.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists every game, 46.6 from the field, 38.9 from 3. So yeah, those are great stats also. Koa Pete, 13.3 points, 5.4 rebounds, 2.7 assists. A really good 53.4 field goal percentage, which he's a bigger guy, he's a post, so I'm just counting that to a lot of his shots being in the shorter range. But still, sometimes those are usually against other big guys getting their hands in there. You have to battle for it rather than just shooting an open shot. It's farther, but you have more space to work with. So that's still really impressive that of the shots he takes, he makes over half of them. And then 33.3% from 3, probably doesn't shoot too many, but considering that's literally a third. So, but he's those are great stats for your top 3 players. It's always great to have several players averaging over 13 points a game. uh, in college basketball, where a singular player, the stars don't score quite as much as they do in like NBA that you expect, and it's easier to score in NBA. There's more time to score it, so. But yeah, Arizona, they're full. They're a bunch of good players who will all do their part. I mean, it was fun. It was frustrating because the offense didn't do well, but they took it to Iowa State when we played them on Monday. Their defense did a tremendous job holding ours off, and a lot of it was just the fact that we missed when we had open shots. Neither team could really make a ball for a while in that game, but it's that's still really good defense on their part. So they definitely can be a great defensive team, and they're a great scoring team. So yeah, Arizona's going to be a tough team to beat in these tournaments, but it can definitely be done because it's madness, man. Then you got the Houston Cougars, another really good team in this stacked conference that is the Big 12, especially since these newer rivals like Houston and Arizona these last few years really beefing up the men's basketball department. They're currently ranked number 7. They're 25-5, 13-4 conference. At one point this year, they were the number 1 team. I'm not sure which of these losses ended that, but early in the year when you have those teams moving around, Houston's really good. They usually get 1 or at least 2 pretty frequently. I mean, they were number 1 team last year. They were in the. I mean, yeah, this is the team that was in the championship last year against Florida. This is the team Florida beat. This is the team that beat Cooper Flagg and Duke. I mean, yeah, Houston's a great program. Won the Big 12 last year. Were in the Big 12 championship the year before a certain team upset them. But yeah, they've had a great tenure in the Big 12 so far. They got some great wins this year against number 22 Auburn, 73-72 at a neutral site. Number 14 Arkansas, 94-85 at Arkansas. Number 14 Texas Tech, 69-65. That must have been a good game in Houston at home. They beat number 16 BYU, 77-56. That's a really good win at BYU. That's tremendous. And then their losses this year, you have that one non-conference loss coming against number 17 Tennessee, 76-73 at a neutral site. Number 12 Texas Tech, so they split with Texas Tech this year, 90-86 at Texas Tech. Lost to Iowa State, 70-67 at Iowa State. They lost to Arizona at home, 73-66, and then they lost to number 14 Kansas, 69-56. So, yeah, Houston had a rough stretch there where, they played probably the 3 best teams they played this season, back to back to back, and they lost all of them. But from Iowa State to Arizona to Kansas, they had a rough go of it with those games. But so that's not a good sign going into this point of the season where you've played the Giants in your conference, the teams you're going to be competing with if you want to win the Big 12 title, and you didn't win any of them. You lost, a respectable 3 points to Iowa State, 7 points to Arizona, and then 14 points to Kansas. That's, it's not great. I mean, but Houston's a really good team, and their stats are interesting actually. It's interesting to see, and I can kind of see why they were losing those games when I look at these stats. Points per game, 77.5. That's only 12th in the Big 12 conference, and that's not last. Despite the name, there are more than 12 teams in the Big 12. Big 10 has the same problem. They are also 12th in field goal percentage, only 44.9 in the season. They were only 34.2 from beyond the arc. That's 13th in the conference. But points allowed per game, only 62.3. That was the best in the conference. They have the best defense in the Big 12, but their offense isn't great. But that defense is why they win games, and it's why they win them by decent margins. Their point differential is plus 15.1, third in the conference, despite those other two, the two that are ahead of them in Arizona and Iowa State, having some of the top offenses in the conference. But you run into that issue. You need good defense to go far. That defense wins championships. That is a fact. If you don't think that and you think only offense matters, you are dead wrong. Just look at the Super Bowl this year. Why did the Seahawks win? Because their defense dominated. That's how you win. You need a good offense. You need both. But you need a good offense you need a good offense to score points. You need a good defense to prevent points from being scored. That's how you win championships. That's how you go far. But great offenses, they're what get you there. They're in the regular season, great offenses win games, especially against teams that aren't as good and don't have those defenses. But then you get to the point late in the season where the other team's defenses are really good. And you're going to struggle scoring points, so you need to be able to stop the other team. So Houston having this really good defense is maybe their ticket to going far in these tournaments, and maybe if their offense can figure some stuff out, maybe winning either the conference or maybe making the Final Four, possibly. But still, these other teams, they have good defenses and they have really good offenses, so they're going to score points eventually. So you're going to have to be able to score as well. If not, you're not going to be able to keep up with the Arizonas, the Kansases, the Iowa States in the conference, and then you're not going to be able to keep up with the Michigans and the Dukes in the national tournament. Yeah, they're key players for Houston. You got Kingston Flemings, 16.6 points per game, 3.8 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 48.7 from the field, 37.8 from three. I mean, yeah, I watched him when we played. He did really good. He made shots. I'm like, just go away. Stop it. He kept them in that. He was the reason they were ahead for a while. He were the reason they were almost able to pull that one out. Pause. Then you got Emmanuel Sharp, 15.9 points per game, 2.9 rebounds, 1.89 assists, 41.2 from the field, but 38 from the three. He is a good shooter. I would say got lucky when we played him that he got in foul trouble and wasn't able to be on the court much. But, he can be that guy where you're having trouble scoring. You need a three. He can do it. You're starting a run, and a three will really get this crowd going. He can hit it. Fleming can also do that. Flemings is also a good shooter who can make just incredible, especially mid-range shots. He can make some incredible ones. Then you got Milos Uzan, 11.5 per game, 2.5 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 39.3 from the field, and then 35.1 from beyond the arc. Houston's a really good team this year. They've been at the top of the rankings pretty much all season. They struggled lately, so they did drop a little bit, but that's not necessarily a sign that they can't go far in these tournaments. I mean, I'd expect probably semifinal. It depends how these tournaments end up stacking up a little bit. Who you have to play, but they can definitely be they should definitely be a Sweet 16 team. They can definitely be Elite Eight, possibly even Final Four in the tournament. And then you never know. Houston's a really good program. Like they can figure it out for March possibly, and maybe make it to the national championship like they did last year or win it. Then you got the Kansas Jayhawks, currently ranked 14. I wonder who beat you to drop you a couple ranks. My disdain for Kansas University aside, Kansas is a really good team. They stack up well. They've got a great, like I've said multiple times, they got a great home court advantage at Allen Fieldhouse, but it's conference time. You don't get that anymore. The conference tournament is played in, I can't say Missouri or Kansas City. It's close to Kansas. It's really close. You're right there. And I imagine the University of, Lawrence, I don't know exactly where that is. I imagine it's pretty close to Kansas City. So, I'm sure they'll have a good crowd at the Big 12 tournament. Kansas, they got a record 21-9, 11-6 conference. They had a tough schedule early in the season, non-conference, between the neutral site tournament games and the ones they scheduled, which I respect. Give yourself competition early in the year. you could easily do what most teams do and give yourselves layup wins to just kind of boost your numbers and get yourselves warmed up before you get to conference play. But I respect that they went out there and played some legitimate opponents. But their big wins this year, they beat a number 17 Tennessee, 81-76 at a neutral site. They beat number 2 Iowa State, 84-63 at home. They beat number 13 BYU, 90-82 at home. They beat number 13 Texas Tech, 64-61 at Texas Tech. They beat number 1 Arizona, ending their undefeated streak, like I said, 82-71 at Allen Fieldhouse. And then they beat Houston, like I said earlier, 69-56 at Allen Fieldhouse. Losses this year, this is what I was alluding to. They lost to number 25, North Carolina, 87-74 at North Carolina. They lost to number 5, Duke, 78-66 at a neutral site. Number 5, UConn, 61-56 at Allen Fieldhouse. Lost to Iowa State, ranked number 5 at the time, 74-56 at Hilton. And they lost to Arizona in Arizona, 84-61, like I said earlier. Their highest rank this year has been 8. Like I said, they kind of fluctuated kind of all season. They are ranked early. They had those losses. They got knocked out of it. Then they beat Iowa State, got some other good wins. They rose high, dropped a little bit because they had a couple losses late. But, yeah, stats-wise, 75.6 points per game, 13th in the conference. Like I said, they had those early struggles. 45.7 from the field, 10th in the conference. 35.1 from beyond the arc, that's 8th in the conference. Defense is a little bit better, 68.8 points allowed per game. That's 6th in the conference. And point differential plus 6.7, which is 6th in the conference. Then you have the Kansas star players, Darren Peterson, 19.5 points, 4.2 rebounds, 1.6 assists per game. He's shooting 44.5 from the field, 38.5 from 3. Then you got Trey White, 14.0 points, 6.8 rebounds, 1.8 assists per game. Shooting 46% from the field, 42.6 from 3. That's very good. Then their big man, Flory Bidunga, 13.8 points per game, 9.2 rebounds, 1.6 assists. 63.7% shooting. Like I said earlier with Pete, big guys not shooting the range like those ones before him, but big guys do got to deal with that physicality down low. So it's still impressive that he's making over 6 out of 10 shots. And then this was a good stat, so I include it. 2.7 blocks per game. I mean, yeah, not fun going to the basket when Badunga's around. But, Kansas, they're an interesting team this year. I think, they are the most decorated team in the Big 12. They won the most Big 12 tournaments, because they're really good. The only coach they've ever had have a losing record is literally the guy that invented basketball, funnily enough. But, yeah, they can definitely make their marks in these tournaments, whether, getting Sweet 16 and beyond in the National, possibly getting semis and maybe even in the Big 12 conference tournament championship. So, but yeah, but like I've said, they had those struggles early. They've had a couple losses late, which may hurt them a little bit going into these tournaments. But, they had a good resurgence kind of once the new year came around, January hit, and they started kind of figuring their stuff out. So they're dangerous. They can definitely get some stuff done in these tournaments. Then you got teams that maybe some of the more casual watchers may not really be too familiar with. You got the Texas Tech Red Raiders. They're ranked number 10 right now. Record 22-8. Conference record 12-5. They have some very impressive wins this season. They beat number 3 Duke 82-81 at Duke. They beat number 11 BYU 84-71 at home. They beat Houston 90-86 at home. They beat Arizona 78-75 in overtime at Arizona. They beat Iowa State 82-73 at Iowa State, giving Iowa State their first home loss of the season, which I guess they also did give Arizona their first home loss of the season. So, yeah, they've got some very impressive wins. Losses-wise, they've lost to number 14 Illinois, 81-77 at Illinois. They lost to number 1 Purdue, 86-56. Oh, 86-56. Okay, Purdue killed them. at a neutral site. They've lost to 17 Arkansas, 93-86 at Arkansas. They lost at Houston when they were ranked number 7, so that was probably the more recent one. That was probably the most recent game, 69-65. And then they did beat Kansas 64-61 when they were ranked number 11 at Texas Tech. So, yeah, Texas Tech, they're probably a dark I don't know if I want to say they're a dark horse team because they're the 10th ranked team in the country. They're probably going to get a 3 seed, maybe 4 at minimum in the national tournament. But I mean, they're a team not too many people are probably familiar with if they're just they watch casually or they just don't pay that much attention to the Big 12 overall. I mean, I'm not sure I would if I didn't focus on the Big 12 teams more so, and if I didn't do some research going into this episode, which probably the most research I've ever done for an episode thus far, getting all these stats. So speaking of the stats, Texas Tech, 81.5 points per game, 7th in the conference, 47.1% from the field, 7th in conference, an impressive 39.4% from the 3, leads the conference in 3-point shooting, which that's a lot of how they beat Iowa State. Defensively, they allow 72.2 points per game. That's 8th in the conference. Point differential is a plus 9.2 per game, which is 4th in the conference, so that's pretty good. Their star players, these are some very impressive stats from the star players, so I guess they kind of more rely on these, especially these top 2 guys, to get their points more so than a lot of these other teams before where they kind of shared it a lot and just kind of had those few that just were in the upper teens. But you got JT Toppin, who's got 21.8 points per game, 10.8 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists, shooting over 50% from the field, 54.8, but 28.1 from the 3. So I guess I'm not too familiar with the actual players of Texas Tech. I said earlier I missed that game when they came to Iowa State, so I didn't get that chance to familiarize myself in person. I didn't even get to watch the game in general, but I guess I don't know if he's a big man or not. He's probably a big man. Looking at the rebounds, so that makes sense why his 3-point isn't great. But averaging a double-double is extremely impressive. That is tremendous performance from JT Toppin this season. Then you got Christian Anderson, 19.1 points per game, 3.7 rebounds per game, 7.7 assists. So, he's their assist guy. Probably 48.4 from the field, 42.4 from 3. That's pretty good. Then you got Donovan Atwell, 13.3 points, 3.2 rebounds, 7 assists, 46 from the field, and a impressive 45.8 from the 3. So Texas Tech is a team that can definitely beat some of these upper guys because they have throughout the season. They've beaten all the teams that I've mentioned before them. So they can make noise in the conference tournament, possibly even go on to win it. You never know. And then, they can definitely, get Sweet 16, maybe nudge their way to Elite 8 in the, national tournament. I'm kind of just saying that for all these, but I do legitimately think that because there's just so many good teams in the Big 12 that I think that they'll probably have multiple teams in the Elite 8 that are from the Big 12. And probably, I'd imagine at least one in the Final Four, probably Arizona, but, it could be someone else. It's madness. Then for the 6th and final team that I'm going to cover in depth, I got the BYU Cougars, who they're not currently ranked, but they've had a lot of wins, and they were ranked for the majority of the season, so I included them. They're 20-10. They're 8-9. They have a poor conference record. That's just the unfortunate part. So, yeah, they're probably not going to make as many waves as I think these other 5 teams will, but you never know, and they have the capabilities if they can just kind of lock in and turn some stuff around. Wins-wise, they got number 23 Wisconsin, 98-70 at a neutral site. That was a great win for them. And number 6 Iowa State, 79-69 at home. So I guess they didn't win too many of those big games on like the other five teams I discussed, but and maybe this is just me kind of trying to compensate for Iowa State losing to them, try to make them sound like a really good team, but I think they're a solid team. You know, I wanted to discuss 6 when I kind of initially thought of this idea. And, you know, they were ranked, I think, when I thought of it. So that's kind of what went into my thinking. But, you know, they have been ranked a lot this year. Their highest rank in the year was 7 points per, you know, stats-wise. You know, 84.4 points per game. That's second in the Big 12. Field goal percentage, 47.8. Third in the Big 12. 3% point percentage, 35.1. Ninth in the Big 12. Points allowed, 72.8 per game. That's 9th in the Big 12. Point differential, plus 8.6. That's 5th in the conference. But I think maybe here's the main reason I kind of considered them in this. Like, these 3 players definitely have scored the most of, especially this number 1 guy. Some of you may already know him, but AJ Dybantsa. I may be pronouncing that wrong. Maybe it's Dybantsa. But, you know. But AJ, he's got 24.8 points per game, 6.7 rebounds, 3.8 assists. You know, he's a guy, you know, a lot of mid-range and beyond the arc stuff also, along with just getting into the basket. But still 52.1% from the field, which maybe you have to get that many points in college basketball. 34.7 from the 3. Then you got Robert Wright III, 18.4 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, 4.7 assists, 47.2 from the field, 42.4 from beyond the arc. Those are really good stats also, especially in the scoring area. Then you got Richie Saunders, 18 points per game straight up, 5.8 rebounds, 2.1 assists, shooting 48.9 from the field, 37.6 from 3. I mean, you got players that can do that kind of stuff. I don't know how they don't have a better record, I guess. I need to. So, yeah, maybe it could be interesting to go more in depth on these losses that they had. I think I've mentioned all of these, but I'll just go through them quickly. They lost Texas Tech at Texas Tech, 84-71. They lost both games to Arizona, 75-66, at home, 86-83. Lost to 14 Kansas, 90-82 at Kansas. Lost to Houston at home, 77-66. And they lost to number 3 UConn, 86-84 at neutral site. So, I mean, some of those games were pretty close. So they are capable of winning some of those. But yeah, BYU is a team that, you know, they've also kind of had Iowa State's number these last couple of years. They beat us in a tight game in the regular season at Iowa State last year. Then they eliminated us from the tournament. They beat us again this year at BYU. So maybe this is just, like I said, maybe I'm trying to think they're better than they are. But, you know, they're a solid team. They might be able to do something in this conference tournament. But yeah, these are in my opinion, the top 6. I think the top 5 are probably undisputed. Those are the best teams in the Big 12. I mean, yeah, that's a third of the top 15 teams in the entire country are from the Big 12 this year. And I'm also a team that I didn't go in depth on, but you know, TCU, they're a team who I think kind of can play up to their competition, especially maybe they also play down to their competition, which is why they don't have as tremendous of a record as a lot of these other teams. But they beat Iowa State, they beat Texas Tech, they had a game against Kansas going to overtime where they just narrowly lost by 4. They only lost to Houston by 8. So, you know, they can definitely like make a wave in the conference tournament and maybe eliminate one of those good teams in an upset and kind of shake things up a little bit. But will they win it? Probably not. But, you know, that's a team that can definitely shake things up. There's a couple other solid teams in the Big 12 this year, like UCF. You know, those first 5 especially are the ones that have the capabilities of making headlines at this point in the season. Iowa State has been a solid team throughout the season. They can definitely win the conference tournament and then get pretty far in the national tournament. Arizona has been number one team most of the season. They are a team that can definitely win it all, both conference and national. Houston, they were in the championship last year. They're the reigning Big 12 champs. They're still a really good team. They can definitely win the conference again, go back to back. They can definitely go far into the tournament, maybe squeak their way into the Final Four or beyond. Kansas, they're interesting. They can definitely be in contention for the conference tournament, maybe wiggle their way to the Elite Eight in the tournament. Texas Tech, another team that can wiggle their way in the Elite Eight, maybe get far, maybe upset one of those other 4 teams I mentioned and get their way into the semis for the conference tournament or maybe even finals, who knows. But yeah, the Big 12 this year is really good. And yeah, I'm doing this because I've looked at these teams. I've seen what they're capable of. I've kind of been hyper-focused on them. But there's other great teams in the country this year. Duke, Michigan, Nebraska, Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue. Purdue's not as good, but UConn, Florida. There's plenty of great teams outside of the Big 12 this year that can also have a shot at winning it all. I mean, heck, there are probably teams that nobody on this planet could think that could possibly make it to the Final Four, and then they make it anyway. We could have a Loyola situation this year. You never know. It is March Madness for a reason. I kind of want a little bit more of the madness. I understand the madness kind of refers to those few upsets on the first couple rounds that make absolutely no sense. Like, I think it was McNeese, beating Purdue in the first round last year, if I'm remembering right. Something like that. Or, those rare couple times where a 1 seed who is looking like right now going to be, with UConn losing today, probably Florida, Arizona, Michigan, and Duke. Maybe they could lose in the first round. You never know. But, yeah, that's my thoughts on the Big 12 teams going into the conference and national tournaments. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this video, click the like button, subscribe for more, hit the bell for notifications for when I post new videos. I've heard there's this hype button thing. If you see it, please click it. It might get me more attention. I'm a small level creator at the moment, so any help is greatly appreciated. If you think anyone else would enjoy this, tell them. Share the video. Thank you for listening to this episode of the At the Helm podcast. Have a wonderful day.